U.S. housing is in ruins. 70% of homeowners can't afford it anymore. UK home affordability is at its worst since the 19th century, which explains why house prices have doubled compared to inflation in 2 generations. Wages have stagnated below inflation. Recently, mortgage rates have risen to 6.7%, making homeownership even more unattainable. As if that weren't enough, rising rents are squeezing renters. Rents are predicted to rise over 8% this year, worse than in big cities. San Francisco now rents dorm beds for $1,200 a month. A bed, no apartment or room. That's why Londoners pay £500 a month to rent a storeroom beneath the stairs. The expense of living crisis's additional strains make for tragedy. This goes beyond historical tendencies and generational economic pressures. A small group of unknown corporations has made the problem much worse. Vanguard, Blackstone, the UBS Group, and BlackRock bought $60 billion in housing markets, bringing the system to the edge of disaster. Here's how. Wall Street is investing in single-family homes. Vanguard and BlackRock invest trillions of dollars for clients. Housing is one. These trillion-dollar firms can easily outbid average people, often by 50%. Houses are listed hours later. Nearly 25% of homes sold in 2022 went to institutional investors instead of families that needed them. That's almost twice last year's 12%. 15 years ago, this didn't happen. Wall Street steered away from these residences almost entirely. Instead, they acquire billions of mortgage bonds, which earned profits from homeowners paying their mortgages. What changed? What happened? After the housing market meltdown, the banks' cherished mortgage bonds skyrocketed. Global financial crisis. Because banks had leveraged so much on housing rising, it was disastrous when it didn't. The collapse of Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, which required billions in taxpayer bailouts, caused one of the worst economic disasters in history. The financial capital's opening bell will ring in 5 seconds after Wall Street's worst day since 1987. We wish it meant less. As property prices fell, hundreds of thousands of families lost their houses. Wall Street, mostly responsible for the catastrophe, sensed an opportunity. BlackRock capitalized on the crisis. The U.S. government engaged BlackRock to manage enormous quantities of crisis-era money and assets. BlackRock developed a multi-trillion-dollar company using these money and contacts. Instead of buying mortgage bonds and profiting from the property boom, other corporations bought houses outright to make a fortune. Since so many homes were foreclosed, they were sold. Demand was still low. A stagnating housing market needs more buyers. The government gave institutional investors practically exclusive access to hundreds of thousands of foreclosed houses to fill the shortfall. Most of these sold for $100,000, $150,000. But some went for $50, $60,000. This would be disastrous years later. The initial homes sold were outdated and needed significant improvements before they could be lived in. Companies that bought them would refurbish them and lease them to needy households. The families may eventually buy the home by investing more money. However, the strategy relied on Wall Street investors not abusing the system like they did a few years before. After the floodgates opened, Wall Street billions bought abandoned buildings. 36 billion Wall Street dollars bought almost 200,000 foreclosed properties in 6 years. An overnight financial sector emerged. Companies bought thousands of cheap dwellings during the gold rush. Invitation Homes, which held over 80,000 single-family homes, was acquired by Blackstone, an investing powerhouse with almost $1 trillion in assets. What was gained? While tenants paid the mortgage, Wall Street corporations made money on the house's worth. A few years later, housing prices rose, making these already discounted investments extremely profitable. The properties could also be used as equities to acquire loans, giving these businesses millions more to invest in anything they desired. This usually meant more single-family dwellings, but one issue was obvious to renters. Financial giants were terrible landlords. Two locals no longer had a good friendship. Instead, crash victims often rented their former homes to a variety of shell businesses and firms hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. Then they bought the residences with little repairs and renovations. No matter the long-term issues, they had to look good at first. As the market stabilized, the firms who owned the residences had to slash costs. Thus, this would require eliminating some support employees, raising rents to predatory levels, and giving renters more duties. The landlord used to fix and maintain the Liverpool house. New contracts included. Renters were evicted if they didn't sign. This was a massive transfer of cash from working people to Wall Street millionaires and billionaires, and it was only beginning. Single-family homes are nevertheless valuable as financial assets despite these issues. Wall Street investors can profit by manipulating housing markets, but not globally. Instead, businesses bought bulk dwellings in one location. Thus, single entities might control local housing markets and raise rents and costs. After a few years, they could sell the residences for more and pocket the difference. Particular cities suffered. Investors acquired approximately 40% of Phoenix homes for sale in August 2012. Several months later, housing values rose 34%, pricing out average folks who water by the houses and generating more crooked and exploitative rents. Unfortunately, the story hasn't altered today. The only difference is scale and that they're no longer foreclosed. Blackstone is one of the leading firms in this gloomy business, and Washier has pushed into the general markets. Their managed assets are mostly housing and single-family houses. They bought Home Partners of America, which owns 17,000 houses, for $6 billion in 2021. Invitation Houses are the top single-family home sellers, despite owning over 80,000 homes. Following this money, you discover who owns these companies. Vanguard and BlackRock own the most of these companies. BlackRock bought 7.3 million more shares in 2022. BlackRock has stated that they don't own single-family houses and aren't active in that business, although they own one of the largest shares in a company that owns over 80,000. They support huge enterprises buying property. Even stranger is the number of press articles exonerating BlackRock directly. Vox title: Wall Street isn't to blame for the housing market catastrophe goes into great length on how BlackRock are just entirely innocent, all while ignoring the public investments into the business. They ignite it. They blame local governments and homeowners. The Atlantic published a similar article with a subtle title: BlackRock is not ruining the U.S. housing market, and so many more are pushing the same message that your neighbors are to blame, not the trillion-dollar company infamous for corrupting the market. The picture becomes even clearer when you find out who funds and owns these media companies. NBC Universal is managed by Comcast, while Comcast is owned by Vanguard and BlackRock, the two largest stockholders in the United States. Their Comcast holdings total $25 billion. The widow of Steve Jobs, Lauren Powell Jobs, owns Atlantic Media, which publishes The Atlantic. Since she is one of the world's wealthiest people and has a background in investment banking, it's easy to deduce that she is on the side of those who are trying to keep the general public from discovering that their entire housing market is being bought out from under them, which is why so many Atlantic articles have come to BlackRock's defense. They can't tell the public that Wall Street's trillion-dollar firms are the reason you can't afford a home because it could affect their corporate overs. Unfortunately, BlackRock's massive business includes buying our homes. In 2022, institutional investors acquired over 25% of new residences, up from 12% last year. One of the world's most complex mathematical algorithms now predicts a 98% risk of recession, causing markets to panic. After this statement, practically every major stock fell, sending the S&P 500 down 3% for the month and 23% from its peak, leaving us all wondering, wait, I'm diversified. How can my portfolio keep losing? Since the world's largest companies say we're not diverse enough. The basic stock-bond strategy lost 25% last year, according to Goldman Sachs' stunning research. Goldman estimates the optimal stock allocation has dropped from 60% to 45%. How do you recover your stolen returns with that difference? The government argues investing in real assets is an art that protects your purchasing power. Contemporary art appreciated higher than real estate at 20% per year during the last high inflation period. BlackRock oversees trillions for Wall Street banks and pension funds. BlackRock, Vanguard, and others have invested trillions in Apple, Facebook, Nike, General Electric, Fox, Disney, Microsoft, Paramount, IBM, Tesla, and Google. The list goes on. BlackRock and Vanguard influence society at many levels. In addition to the other issues that arise from so much power being concentrated in so few hands, research has shown that when competing businesses share ownership, it is bad for businesses all around. This is because it leads to higher prices, while the quality and quantity of products and services produced suffers. BlackRock manages other people's money, and their clients own all this wealth, according to defenses of these activities. When you consider where BlackRock's $8.5 trillion under management originates from, this is a savvy technique to deflect fair criticism. BlackRock's investments are mostly from other Wall Street financial giants. 72% of assets are managed for other financial institutions, 20% for insurance companies, and 8% for other industries. Even fewer of these 8% come from individuals and small businesses. BlackRock is Wall Street. Even though BlackRock claims their clients hold the assets, they're usually other large banks or enterprises. They trust BlackRock with their money. Because Black Box survival depends on their money, they know BlackRock will act in their interest. Why does BlackRock dominate Wall Street? Why do they control the global economy? Aladdin, BlackRock's secret weapon, sets them apart. Aladdin is a 1998 computer program. A crude algorithm predicted stock market trends and profitable investments. After 25 years of tinkering, advancements, and technical growth, has become a monster. Aladdin represents art, AI, and algorithmic technology, and its major purpose is to read the future by researching endless gigabytes of data. Its financial predictions and assessments are alarming and accurate. Aladdin managed $21 trillion in 2020. Wall Street and major banks are gaining greatly from this technology. When someone utilizes this technology, BlackRock charges fees for every penny Aladdin handles. Aladdin signifies technocrat control over risk and the future. Aladdin's whole code base is focused on risk mitigation. Wall Street and the financial world love Aladdin because he can keep the system going forever by examining the past. He must preserve the system that made them prosperous. Aladdin's funding advances this path. It's exponentially positive feedback. In 2013, Aladdin controlled 7% of the world's financial assets. If money equals power, Aladdin is the most powerful entity in the world, but BlackRock controls him. BlackRock controls this authority. They control this money. Again, BlackRock-owned media outlets emphasize that BlackRock's clients wield power. BlackRock admits they make all investment decisions and waits. BlackRock now legally controls its investments' impact. Despite not being owned by BlackRock, they regularly sit on executive boards and had a lot of voting power due to BlackRock's huge stakes in firms. Behind the scenes, BlackRock and others like them have a huge impact on the biggest corporations. BlackRock has enormous soft power. Larry Fink, the company's founder and CEO, regularly rubs elbows with international leaders. He attends the G20 summits and routinely meets with presidents like Emmanuel Macron. And BlackRock has a lot of influence over the U.S. government. Since the U.S. government gave BlackRock entire ownership of assets from the 2008 financial meltdown, they've always had a special bond. Larry Fink advised all presidents on finances. BlackRock executives like Brian Deese, who directs Biden's National Economic Council, are becoming important government officials. The U.S. government has so many ex-BlackRock personnel that they may be another investment. This also ensures BlackRock's immense power and status quo. In recent years, BlackRock has converted their political agenda into an investment-grade measure by giving each firm an ESG score based on environmental and humanitarian issues. It's greenwashing. BlackRock invests in fossil fuels and other industries that run counter to its idealistic aspirations of aiding humanity. As long as Nike and Apple keep making money, they'll finance Chinese sweatshops. However, they promote the environmentalist agenda. Blackpool symbolizes MT activism's capitalist worldview. By saying the proper words and enforcing their own political policies, Blackwell can claim to benefit society while doing nothing. We're one of the fastest-growing decarbonization startups. They only censure and counsel corporations that oppose their political agenda. Today, people realize this. BlackRock is increasingly criticized and affecting the global economy. People are realizing that BlackRock is America's biggest threat to homeownership. Despite BlackRock's media surveillance, more people are learning about BlackRock's nefarious business model. However, BlackRock's main business is avoiding risks and disasters, so they're likely to stay or conspire with the World Economic Forum and government leaders to keep you poor. Today's done. Subscribe to BizVentures and ring the bell icon if you liked the video.